Tom Campbell here. I and MBT Events hope you like this video. It was made possible by donations from our supporters. If you're one of them, thank you so very, very much. If you're new to MBT and find something of significant value in our videos, please consider supporting their production through our Patreon account or through a one-time donation. It would be very much appreciated. The links are in the description below. Thank you.
Hello, Tom. We're here for another one of our sessions where you answer questions. Now, we have some questions from our Patreon supporters, some even from the Global Family, MBT Global Family on Facebook. Let me start with that one. The question that came in is almost a comment on the MBT Global Family. I have been studying math and physics for some time, so I can totally grasp the paradigm of quantum classical mechanics distinction. I'm also interested in the modeling of universe, which Tom describes in MBT. I'm doing the former just to grasp the current paradigm for fun. I'm a corporate employee, and this hobby is something I like to do in the long run. However, as for the efficiency of growing, does studying this make sense, or how do we quantify growth in terms of learning technical things? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we don't qualify growth in terms of learning, intellectual things. Intellectual learning does not help you grow much, except for the fact that it may open up understanding. It may open up big pictures. You may finally get an aha moment where things fall together and you have a better understanding of what's going on and why it's going on and who you are. So the intellect can be helpful in helping us understand at a deeper level. Growth only comes when you change at that deeper level. It's change at the being level, understanding even at the being level that counts, not at the intellectual level. Often that understanding starts at the intellectual level before it gets down into the being level. So the intellect is not something to be thrown away, but it's not the entire solution. That just helps you see bigger pictures. Now, when you take that bigger picture down to the being level, which means you not only understand it intellectually so you can chat about it, but you really understand it at a much deeper level. It's a hard thing to explain about the being level versus the intellect, but the being level is also in an intuitive space. It's where you just know. It's not necessarily an intellectual space where you have these facts and therefore this is true. At the being level, these are things you just know. This is the way it is. Okay. And of course, you can have false things at the being level. Everything at the being level doesn't make it true just because it's at the being level. There's fears at the being level as well. But the intellect is a helpful tool for helping you see the bigger picture. Because if it intellectually makes sense to you, and you see how A leads to B leads to C and how you fit into that picture, and if your intellect gets that, then it's a lot easier for you to eventually get that at a deeper level where it actually changes who you are. So it's also kind of the difference between being authentic and having an image. We can live through our intellect with an image. This is who we think we are. This is who we'd like to be. This is how we act. We like to act kind to people because we know that's better. We like to act politely to people because we know that just helps lubricate relationships. And we do all that from the intellect. But that's different than actually being kind. And being polite is a different thing than acting polite and acting kind. Anyone can act. But in order to be that way, you have to take that concept of kindness down to the being level, where now it's not because it's the right thing to do, or because what I was taught, or because it lubricates social events. It's just the way I am. I am kind. You see, that's the difference that I mean. So yes, your intellect can learn all sorts of things, but until it gets down to the being level and changes who you are, then you don't actually grow up much.
Of course, is that significant to try to learn? Well, you've taken physics, you have acquired a doctorate degree in physics. Um, is that important to get that technical background as well as the being level?
Well, only in as much as it helps you learn to think. It helps you learn to be rational. It helps you learn to see cause and effect at a deeper level. Most of us see cause and effect at just the surface level. Here's the effect, there's the cause. But that cause also had a cause. And the cause of the cause had a cause. And the cause of the cause of the cause had a cause. You see, it goes way back. So you can train your mind to where you can see maybe 4 or 5 levels back, understanding how and why things are the way they are. Now you have a deeper appreciation for things rather than just seeing everything superficially. It just is because it is. You have a better understanding of how things work and why they work that way. Learning to think rationally and think logically, learning to develop your intellect is very helpful that way. Can help you see bigger pictures. See, so it's not necessary to get a PhD in anything. There are some people who dropped out of high school and never even got a high school degree, but they're very, very bright and they understand things deeply. There are some people who have 2 PhDs and couldn't think their way out of a wet sack. So it's not the degree that's important. It's the ability to which you can understand, the depth to which you can understand things. And most of that takes focus, it takes some concentration. You have to spend time thinking about things. Some agitation is required. And that's a thoughtful life, a life with lots of introspection. And yes, that's very valuable. And that can all be done with the intellect. But again, that doesn't help you evolve the quality of your consciousness, other than the fact that it makes it easier for you then to take that bigger picture and live it, not just act it, but live it and be it. So you almost have to get there first with your intellect before you get it down at the being level.
Thank you, Tom. I hope that answers the question. The next question comes from Josh. Um, he says, I'd like to make a brief introduction and then address my question or comment, which I think will make more sense in context. I was raised in a religious home and obtained a degree in theology early on. I became an atheist in my early 20s and went on to study biology and became a physician. I persisted as an atheist until my 40th year. In November of 2021, I experienced a random out-of-body event that I didn't understand until recently reading Monroe and your books this month. The out-of-body experience was accompanied with profound mediumship experiences, a thing I didn't believe was possible and had no previous familiarity with. All of those experiences stopped after about 6 months, but they left me convinced of an afterlife and permanence of the conscious self. Your book, along with Robert Monroe's, has helped me to frame my experience as beginning with an out-of-body experience, and I have unequivocally accepted the supernormal aspect of these experiences. Having read dozens of different books and trying to reorganize my headspace and worldview, I keep hearing a common theme that I'm struggling to accept. It's likely my boneheadedness, as I was clearly on the wrong track for 2 decades. The issue that I'm struggling with stems from my philosophical indoctrination to post-Enlightenment philosophers, but most significantly, Wittgenstein. His process really shaped my younger mind, and I'm struggling to move past some ideas that probably have language as a core explanation. In your first Toe book, you talk about unbounded absolute oneness as existing outside of time and space. Many authors I've read use this language. The problem I have is that all of our language is self-referential and spatio-temporally reliant. Outside is a preposition. It necessitates time-space, or at least a version of sequence and reference, for the concept to not fall flat. Saying outside, time and space to me is like saying the married bachelor struggled with his identity. It's irrational. I do grant that sequence and spatial awareness must be different outside of our world and galaxy, but I can't get past this idea that I've now seen ubiquitously through the paranormal literature. Maybe it's an irrelevant point, but I find it hard to buy into explanations when they have irrational fundamentals. Now, I say this while having experienced what I previously would have considered mental illness and irrational, so I'm not trying to be argumentative for argument's sake. I'm really stuck on this fine line of reasoning. Maybe its language is failing, but even conceptually, mathematically, I'm not a physicist, the idea fails me. Maybe you can provide some clarity. Or if not, no harm, no foul. I really am still left reeling from this experience and trying to find the purpose. For that matter, I haven't been able to replicate the out-of-body experience despite multiple attempts, and the psychic phenomenon has significantly dampened, along with my mediumship that occurred temporarily. I'm not even sure what the relationship the out-of-body experience had to the psychic experiences, other than a seeming causative or temporarily aligned relationship. Thank you for answering this, and I appreciate any thoughts you have on it.
Okay, a couple of things here. One, I can tell you that the reason that you, after 20 some years of devout atheism, that you had an out of body experience and medium experience and whatever other descriptors you'd have on your experience, the reason that happened is because you were ready. You were ready for that to happen. You were ready to embrace something beyond. Your feelings of there's got to be more, or that there's something bigger than just the material existence, probably were needling around on the edges of your mind someplace. But in any case, you've been around this experience packet circuit enough times that you were grown up enough that it was time for you to kind of reawaken, if you will, and kind of back to the level of growth and understanding that you've had before. So the system thought you were ripe to be plucked, that you were ready to go on and to not be so constrained in your thinking as far as the nature of reality, the nature of being, and what life is all about, etc. It was very constrained inside your um, belief system. So that's why you were ready, you were open. So the system tries to help us evolve because our evolution is also its evolution because we're it. So that's why it happened to you. And it happened in a way that you couldn't toss it out. You couldn't just deny it easily and say, well, gee, that's a fluke, but I'll go on with my life because you're a more serious person than that. And the fact that it's not quite as available to you now as it was before, it's because it doesn't need to be. The door's been opened a crack. Now it's up to you. Push the door open wider. It's not like the experiences you had will go on and deepen and grow. They were just an eye opener, door opener. That being done, pushing the door the rest of the way open, moving through it, and learning what there is to learn it's all up to you. The system's not going to give you that, but it will give you a little whiff kick in the pants, if you like, in order to wake you up to get you moving along in that direction, particularly if you've kind of already earned your spurs in other lifetimes. All right, so that's why it happened to you. And the best argument I have for explaining to you about this concept of beyond physical time and space, beyond this reality, is that of a virtual reality. Now, you evidently haven't read enough through my theory yet to get to the point where our physical reality is a virtual reality. Otherwise, you wouldn't ask the question. So let me give you just a short rundown on that. And that is, one, consciousness is fundamental. It's the only thing that's fundamental. And that this reality that we call the physical universe is a virtual reality computed by consciousness. Consciousness is an information system. Okay? Part of that information system, called consciousness, configures itself as a computer and computes this reality. Now, that probably sounds all kind of crazy and way out there, but if you look at some of my videos where I discuss this in detail, you will find that it is very rational. There's no step in it that has a kind of a wild assumption or any crazy non-logic in it. It all is good science. So you can go back and find that. So now look at it this way. Given this is a virtual reality computed by consciousness, now that doesn't mean that the consciousness system programmed it. Our virtual reality has evolved from a rule set and a set of initial conditions. It's an evolved reality. And there's a lot of other details that you'll get when you go further into MBT. But anyhow, so this physical reality is really a virtual reality. It's computed. And think of yourself, you, a human being, Homo sapien, you're an avatar in this computed reality. Okay? Now, that's your body. Who are you? You are a consciousness, an individuated unit of consciousness, and you are the player of that avatar. Now, let's look for a minute about the relationship between avatars and players. The player makes all the avatar's choices. Okay, so the avatar can do nothing without a player. It just sits there and wobbles, but actually has no action that it can do. So from the avatar's viewpoint, the virtual reality in which it lives is physical. If you're an elf in the world of Warcraft, then the trees are physical, the ground is physical, the rocks are physical. If you run into a tree, it'll hurt. If you fall into water, you can't swim, you'll drown. It's a physical place. Buildings to go into, forests, rivers, sky, land, all the physical things that we're used to. Houses with windows, physical space. But as an avatar, the computer cannot be in the same reality as the avatar. See, the computer has to be outside the virtual reality that it's creating. The computer can't be inside. A virtual reality cannot compute itself. It has to be computed elsewhere. So if you are avatar in a virtual reality, that virtual reality seems physical. And time is a given there. Time keeps moving on. It's a straight arrow of time. The computer, that virtual reality, then is non-physical to you. You, the avatar. From the avatar's viewpoint, the computer computes the virtual reality must be non-physical. And the player plays the avatar must also be non-physical, because the player and the computer have to be in the same reality frame. That's because they're communicating directly with each other all the time. You don't do that across reality frames. That's within a reality frame. So the computer and the player have to all be of basically the same stuff, which is consciousness. You are an individuated unit of consciousness, playing human avatar that is in a virtual reality computed by consciousness. Now, how that reality got created, why it's created, what its purpose is, and all the rest of that you can learn. This is not the place to go through all of that. I've gone over that in videos many, many times. So, and you'll get that out of the books, but probably get it more clearly out of the videos. So, all of that is logical and rational. So that's why, if you have that viewpoint, if you are consciousness, you as consciousness can move around within, can interact, can experience that larger consciousness system because you're a part of it. As an avatar, you are limited to that virtual reality. In World of Warcraft, that elf is limited to sensing. It's five senses. It can hear, it can see, it can feel things, it can touch, smell. It can do those things only within the context of its own rule set and its own reality. Okay, so that's what we call the physical reality. Now, outside in a reality, beyond that physical reality, consciousness. And there's lots of other virtual realities out there. This thing we call our physical reality, virtual reality, is not a singular event. There's many virtual realities out there with all kinds of different rule sets. Some rule sets are very lax, like in the dream reality. You can teleport, you can do other sorts of things. They can just instantly stop, change, because the rule set allows that. In this reality, the rule set, which is physics, basically, it's all the rules that define this reality, define all the energy exchanges in this reality, make this seem very physical because we have a physical causality inside this virtual reality. Everything has a cause because the rule set is very detailed. There are other virtual realities with very tight rule sets that would seem physical. And there's a lot more realities that have looser rule sets that would seem non-physical. The only difference between physical and non-physical is the point of view of the observer. So if you are an observer inside a virtual reality seems physical. If you're having a dream and you're in that dream and you're doing things in that dream, you're walking or talking or building things or whatever you do in your dreams, that dream reality seems physical, and the reality where your body is non-physical. You see? So physical and non-physical are just words that aren't fundamentally, they don't have any fundamental definition. They just are defined from the viewpoint of the observer. So the fact that you can go outside of this virtual reality we call the physical universe into some other virtual reality, and that you can find out things and see things and talk to people, dead or alive, people who've been here before in this virtual reality or not, that there's other spaces and other information, other places. Well, now that makes perfect sense once you understand that this is a virtual reality. But there's one other thing that you should know about this being a virtual reality. If you take that premise that our physical universe is a virtual reality, then you can derive from first principles from that idea quantum physics, relativity, and solve all of the paradoxes in physics. Why does C have to be a constant? Why should particles be best described as probability distributions? What happens when that wave function, probability wave function, collapses to a physical particle? How does that happen? Probability functions, turn into physical particles. These are things that physicists don't understand. There's a whole bunch of paradoxes in physics. And this viewpoint of our reality being fundamentally consciousness, that this is a virtual reality computed and within the larger consciousness system, that viewpoint logically solves all those paradoxes in physics. And I won't go on about that because there's other places where you can read about that. So it's not just clever set of, assumptions and reasoning to explain things about outside of this reality and what that means. It's actually fundamentally correct in a way that derives better, more general physics. It also defines not only the science of the objective, which is physics, but it also defines the science of the subjective. And after all, the subjective world is the more important world, right? Things like love and caring and relationship and justice and, all of that stuff that's important to us, more important to us than the stuff, that's all subjective. So there's a science of the subjective world as well that comes out of this. By science, I mean deductively logical. Hopefully that will explain, how you can have another world that's outside of this time. You'll find that time is simply the created by the outer time loop of the simulation. Delta t, it increments one delta t at a time. That our world is discrete in both space and time, as well as everything else. Everything's discrete because it's a virtual reality. That's why we have the discreteness that's in atomic physics and so on. So anyway, you are asking this question because you just haven't quite gotten there yet as far as reading all this material about this being a virtual reality. Otherwise, you would have already had the answer and you wouldn't have the question. So you just keep on chugging along down this path and you will find good logical explanations of the things that right now you wonder about.
Thank you very much, Tom. And I'm going to point out that the link in the description below this interview will have Tom's Park and also Exploring Consciousness, which is a nice exploring consciousness is a nice way to get started into all of the types of things that can be done in consciousness, as well as explain some of his experiences. And Tom's Park is a way and a process to further develop that ability to get out of body with by letting go of intellect in a very detailed process. So thank you very much, and I'm sure he'll appreciate that answer. I have another question from one of our longtime MBT supporters, Kenji. He says, I hope all is well. I recently came across Tom's question and answer session for 2023 and found it brilliant as always. I'm not sure how often Tom does these or how to submit questions, but I have one I would like to ask for the next time if possible. Just over a year ago, I was at a stoplight in San Francisco on my way to work when a delivery van crashed into my car, totaling it and injuring me. I subsequently found out I had a small brain bleed. Since that time, I have multiple symptoms like brain fog, headaches, neck and back pain, etc. The most difficult issue I face is the apathy that now pervades my life. Not that I haven't gone through the trials and tribulations of life, but this is different. I've always loved travel, new adventures, and exploration, but now I have no desire for any of these things. It is like the joy and enthusiasm of life is gone. Much of my free time is spent binge watching TV. I'm not sure if this is solely from the brain bleed or some kind of psychological effect from the accident or a combination of both. But whatever the cause, I would like to get back my life. The motivation to hike, travel, yoga, meditation, and much more seems to be gone. I was wondering if you might have some insight to my current situation.
Well,
Can
perhaps, Kenji. Nice talking to you again, Kenji. Haven't seen you for a long time. perhaps, and this is just perhaps, but it's a fairly good bet, and that is that after you had that accident, it kind of destroyed your worldview as the world being a safe, interesting, exciting place to explore, because it didn't seem to be so safe anymore. Just out of the blue, bang, something can happen, like being hit by a truck or getting a brain bleed. And that life was perilous, fraught with not only difficulty, but with disaster. And it was totally out of your control. You see, it's the lack of control that I think that makes people shrink down and be a little afraid to go back out and join the world again, because before they didn't really care about control, because they didn't really have a sense that they needed that, or that the world was a dangerous place. Oh, sure, they knew intellectually that the world was a dangerous place and things could happen, and you could fall off cliffs, you could go hiking, get bitten by a rattlesnake, and your car could get in a crash. All those things intellectually we knew were a possibility, but we didn't actually take that down to the brain level. It all stayed up in our intellect, and yeah, well, okay, but that's not going to happen to me. So you get in and do whatever you do. When it does happen to you, that sense of the magic that it won't happen to me kind of disappears. And you feel like, well, maybe it can happen to me. And that loss of confidence, that loss of almost invulnerability you have when you're young, I think is probably what you're suffering from now. I don't think it's just the brain bleed. Could be the brain bleed causes a little fog, but obviously the brain isn't still bleeding. It doesn't just bleed and bleed. They've done something about that. If there's a bleed, then there's a way to fix that. So I would assume that that's been fixed. But it sounds like what you have is more, it's bigger, it's more systemic than just a brain bleed. Brain bleeds are very specific things. You slur your speech. It's hard to balance on your left foot, although your right foot's just fine, those kinds of things. It tends to be very specific to brain bleeds. This is a general attitudinal shift that I think has more to do with the accident, kind of a loss, not a loss of innocence like we talk about, but a loss of being invulnerable. When we're real young, we think we're completely invulnerable. 12 and 13 and 14 and 15-year-old kids feel very invulnerable. Matter of fact, the Army likes to take in 18-year-olds because they feel a lot more invulnerable and worry less about the risks than do the older people. So partly it's age. You're older now, but take that age of being older now and that accident that kind of crashed your sense of safety out in the big world. And I think that's what you're dealing with. And the way to get over it is just to do it anyway. If you used to like to go travel or hiking, even though you don't feel like it and you feel like, I don't think so, I think I'll just stay here and watch TV. Go do it anyhow. Plan a trip, put on your hiking boots, and just go do it. Don't necessarily plan a grand extravaganza someplace like you're going to take a hike for 3 weeks in the Appalachian Trail or something. Don't have to overdo it, but just do a little bit of it. Just go out and hike a little bit, just an hour, 2 hours, and it'll be fun and you'll like it. Go to the places that you most enjoyed hiking and they'll be fun and it'll start to come back to you and you'll gain some wisdom in the process that yes, life is risky, but rather than just kind of pretend that risk doesn't exist, kind of Pollyanna attitude to, oh, it won't happen to me. you'll have a little more wisdom than that. You'll realize, yes, those things can happen. That's all right. Life is risky. Existence is risky. Staying home and watching TV, would have its own risks. That can turn you into a potato head, a couch potato with a potato head. That's risky too. Everything's risky, except living life to its fullest, making the best choices you can, doing the things you love. That's not risk. That's fine. And if an accident happens because of that, well, okay, accept that. But you're going to live and enjoy life and, live it to its fullest right up until for some reason you can't anymore. Whether that's an accident or old age or whatever it is, you accept all that. But that doesn't keep you from going out and trying. So I think a bubble got busted, and now you're going to have to regroup and just force yourself, just by act of will, to go do something fun. Go hiking. Go on a trip. Take a trip to someplace you'd always wanted to go, but never got around to. Go do it. So, yeah, there'll be a part of you saying, nah, I'll just stay home and watch TV, but just do it anyway. Force yourself to go do it, and you'll see. Eventually, it'll all come back, and you'll get back your confidence. You'll get back your sense of wonder in the world and enjoyment of looking at those fantastic views in the woods and wherever it is you hike. And it'll come back, but you'll see it from a little older and a little wiser viewpoint this time. It won't all be just the same as it was. It'll be a little wiser and a little more adult viewpoint. And that's probably good. So it's an adjustment that in life that you're going through. So make the adjustment. Don't run away from it. Don't hide in the TV room from it, because that'll just keep getting worse, and you'll get more and more annoyed with yourself and more exasperated and so on. And eventually that exasperation will probably drive you out of this funk. But there's no sense going through all of that. Just use your force of will to get out, get back into life, and do the things that are fun for you to do.
Thank you, Tom, and all the best to you, Kenji.
I and MBT Events hope you liked this video. We now have well over 1,000 hours of free video on this YouTube channel. Though these videos are free to our viewers, they represent many thousands of hours in production and editing, and many thousands of dollars invested in video and audio equipment, along with the required computers and software to store and process the raw video into finished products. So far, all of this content has been funded directly out of our own pockets. Be assured, we will always continue to produce free content. It is our life, our purpose, a labor of love that we will continue to pursue as best we can. However, those pockets are not as deep as they used to be. Thus, we are now seeking to augment our resources with support from our viewers. If you find something of significant value in our videos, please consider supporting their production through our Patreon account or through a one-time donation. It would be very much appreciated. The links are in the description below. Thank you.